poison is burning through their veins right now. I can see it in Carter's eyes, that moment of realization when the poison hits your nervous system and you understand that someone has finally outsmarted you. His hand is pressed against his chest, and there's a thin line of blood trickling from his nose onto his father's Persian rug. Madison is trying to crawl toward the door, but her legs aren't working anymore. The emerald earrings she stole from her father's safe are catching the lamplight as she collapses. She keeps looking at me like she can't believe sweet little Elena could do this to them. Sweet little Elena. "You poisoned us," Carter gasps, and there's genuine shock in his voice. Like he can't believe I discovered their plan. Like he actually thought I was stupid enough to drink that bourbon they prepared for me. "I did," I say calmly, settling into my husband's leather chair and crossing my legs. "The same ricin you've been putting in my vitamin capsules for the past 3 weeks." Madison manages to lift her head. "How did you know?" "Because your father taught me to pay attention, to notice when people I trust start acting differently, to recognize the signs when someone wants me dead." Poor little gold digger, they'd thought. Married our father for his money, and now we'll take it back. They have no idea what I really married him for. "The beautiful thing about ricin," I continue, watching Carter's breathing become more labored, "is that it's completely undetectable unless you know to look for it. Perfect for making a young widow's death look like a tragic illness." You switched the glasses," Madison whispers. "I switched more than that." I pull out my phone and show them the recording I made 3 days ago. Carter and Madison in this very room, discussing the best way to slowly poison me. Planning how they'd comfort their grieving father when his young wife finally succumbed to her mysterious illness. "Funny thing about smart homes," I say, "every conversation gets recorded when you know how to access the right systems." Carter tries to say something, but only manages a choking sound. The ricin is shutting down his nervous system now, just like they planned for it to shut down mine. "Do you want to know the really ironic part?" I ask, standing and walking to the window that overlooks the Palo Alto hills. "I actually loved your father, more than either of you ever did." Behind me, Madison makes a sound that might be a laugh or a sob. "I loved him so much that I spent 2 years learning everything about his business, his finances, his family. I wanted to be the perfect wife for him." I turn back to look at them both. "That's how I discovered what you two have been doing with his money." Carter's eyes widen. Even dying, even with poison flooding his system, he's smart enough to understand what I'm implying. The embezzlement from Blackwood Technologies, the insider trading using information from board meetings, the shell companies you created to hide your theft. I walk to James's desk and pull out a thick folder. $47 million stolen from your father's company over the past 3 years. Did you really think he wouldn't notice? He never said. He never said anything because he was protecting you, because he loved you despite what you'd become. I drop the folder on the coffee table between them. Bank statements, transaction records, forensic accounting reports, everything they thought they'd hidden. But I'm not your father, and I don't believe in protecting people from the consequences of their choices. Madison's breathing is getting shallow now. She's maybe 2 minutes from complete respiratory failure. "Please," she whispers, we're family." I almost laugh at that. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't plot each other's murders. Family doesn't destroy the thing their father spent his life building. I kneel down beside her, close enough to smell her expensive perfume, mixing with the scent of fierce sweat. "But you know what the best part is, Madison? Your father knew what you were planning." Her eyes go wide. 3 weeks ago, James came to me with evidence of your theft. He was heartbroken, completely devastated that his own children would betray him like that. Carter makes a gurgling sound that might be an attempt at denial. "He wanted to give you a chance to confess, to make things right. So he scheduled a family dinner for tonight, planning to confront you both." I gesture to the dining room where the table is still set for 4 people. Candles, flowers, James's best china. A last supper that never happened. He died 2 hours before dinner. Sudden heart attack while he was getting dressed upstairs. except it wasn't sudden and it wasn't a heart attack. You see, while I was gathering evidence of your embezzlement, I noticed something interesting in your purchase histories. Digitalis, potassium chloride. Interesting combination for two people who claim to have no medical training. The truth is starting to dawn in their eyes now. Not just that they're dying, but that they were never as smart as they thought they were. James didn't die of a heart attack. You murdered him, injected him with enough digitalis to stop his heart before he could expose your theft. Madison tries to shake her head, but she doesn't have the strength anymore. The only problem with your plan was that you needed me dead too, the grieving widow who might ask too many questions about her husband's sudden death. I stand and smooth down my dress. In 90 seconds, they'll both be dead. In 2 hours, the police will find their bodies and the evidence I've planted in their rooms. Evidence that will make it look like they killed each other in a fight over the inheritance. So really, this isn't murder, I say conversationally. This is justice. You killed my husband for his money, and now you're dying the same way he did. Carter's final breath rattles in his chest. Madison follows 30 seconds later. I sit back down in James's chair and pour myself a glass of bourbon. Real bourbon, not the poisoned vintage they'd prepared for me. The Pappy Van Winkle 25-year burns going down, warming my chest and steadying my hands. It's done. James is avenged. But as I sit there in the silence, surrounded by the bodies of my husband's children, my phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. Impressive work, Elena. But now the real game begins. Your husband's death wasn't about inheritance. It was about activating you. Welcome to the family business, Uncle Patrick. Uncle Patrick. James's father died 20 years ago. Unless he didn't. I scroll through my phone contacts until I find the number I'm looking for. It rings 3 times before a familiar voice answers. Elena, sweetheart, what's wrong? You sound upset. Mrs. Chen, I say to James's housekeeper, the woman who'd comforted me after his funeral, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Of course, dear, anything. James's father, Patrick Blackwood. Tell me about the day he died. A long pause. Elena, why are you asking about Mr. Patrick? Not James's father or the late Mr. Blackwood, just Mr. Patrick, like he was someone she saw regularly. Because I think he's still alive, and I think he's been watching us this whole time. Another pause, then, quietly, you should come home, Elena. There are things you need to know, things about your husband, about his family, about why he really married you. About why he really married me. Mrs. Chen, are you saying James didn't marry me for love? I'm saying love can be complicated, dear, especially in the Blackwood family. The line goes dead. I stare at my phone, at the silence of the house around me, at the bodies of 2 people who thought they were clever enough to steal their father's fortune. But if Mrs. Chen is right, if Patrick Blackwood is still alive, then Carter and Madison weren't the real threat. They were just pawns in a much larger game. A game I'm apparently the star player in. I walk to James's wall safe, the one he thought I didn't know about, and enter the combination I'd watched him use dozens of times. Inside, along with important documents and emergency cash, I find something that makes my blood run cold. A photograph of me as a child, maybe 8 years old, sitting on the steps of a house I don't remember. On the back, someone has written, Amanda Grace Sullivan, age 8, ready for placement. Blackwood. My hands are shaking as I pull out more photos. Me at 12, standing outside a different house. Me at 16, graduating from high school. Me at 22, walking across the stage at Stanford. He's been watching me my entire life. But it's the final photograph that breaks something inside me. It's a picture of me and James at the tech conference where we met 3 years ago. We're laughing at something, completely natural, completely unguarded. Except there's a red circle drawn around James's face and an arrow pointing to me. On the back, target acquired, phase 1 complete. Target acquired. James didn't meet me by accident. He didn't fall in love with me by coincidence. Patrick Blackwood arranged our entire relationship. And that means everything I thought I knew about my marriage, about my life, about who I am, is a lie. But it also means Patrick made one crucial mistake. He taught me how to lie so well that even I believed my own story. And now it's time to find out what the truth really is. Let me tell you how this really started. Not with murder, not with poison, but with a phone call that changed everything I thought I knew about my life. I was sitting in my Palo Alto kitchen, drinking coffee and reading the morning news, when my husband's lawyer called to tell me James was dead. "Mrs. Blackwood, I'm so sorry to be the one to tell you this, but your husband collapsed at the office this morning. The paramedics couldn't revive him." The coffee mug slipped from my hands and shattered on the Italian marble floor, sending scalding liquid across my bare feet. But I barely noticed the pain. All I could hear was the lawyer's voice continuing, professional and distant, explaining about heart attacks and sudden cardiac events, and how sometimes these things just happen to men under stress. Heart attack. At 55, James, who ran marathons and had perfect cholesterol numbers. "Mrs. Blackwood, are you there?" "I'm here," I managed. Where is he now?" "The hospital is handling the arrangements. I'm afraid there will need to be an autopsy, given the sudden nature of..." Something cold settled in my stomach. "Mr. Whitmore, was anyone with James when he collapsed?" "His son, Carter, was in the building for a board meeting. He's the one who found the body." Carter found the body. Carter, who'd barely spoken to his father in 2 years. Carter, who'd been furious about James marrying someone young enough to be his daughter. "I need to see him," I said. "Of course, the family viewing is scheduled for..." "No, I need to see him now, at the hospital." "Mrs. Blackwood, I understand your grief, but..." "Mr. Whitmore." My voice came out sharper than I'd intended. "My husband just died suddenly at 55 with no warning symptoms. I'm not waiting for anyone's schedule to see his body." An hour later, I stood in the hospital morgue, staring down at the man I'd loved for 3 years. James looked peaceful, almost like he was sleeping, but something was wrong. "The preliminary examination shows classic signs of cardiac arrest," the medical examiner was explaining. "Complete heart failure, very sudden." "Has the autopsy been performed yet?" "We're waiting for final authorization from the family." "Authorization from the family. I'm his wife." "Yes, but his children have requested time to consider." "His children have no legal authority here. I do." I signed the autopsy authorization while standing over James's body, my hands surprisingly steady. But inside, questions were multiplying like cancer cells. Why were Carter and Madison trying to delay the autopsy? Why had Carter been at the office for a board meeting when James had told me he was working alone today? And why did James's skin have that faint, bitter almond smell that I'd read about in forensic textbooks? The drive home was a blur of California sunshine and sympathy calls, friends offering condolences, business partners expressing shock, everyone saying the same meaningless words about sudden loss and tragic accidents. But when I pulled into our driveway, I found Carter and Madison waiting for me. "Elena," Madison said, stepping forward with what I'm sure she thought was a sympathetic expression, "we're so sorry for your loss." "Your loss, not our loss. Not the family's loss." "Thank you," I said carefully. "I wasn't expecting to see you both so soon." "We wanted to discuss the arrangements," Carter said. "The funeral, the will reading, the transition of Dad's business interests." The transition. Already talking about dividing up their father's estate before his body was even cold. "Of course. Would you like to come in?" What I really wanted was to be alone with my grief, to process the fact that the man I'd built my life around was gone. But I could see the calculation in their eyes, the way they were already treating me like an obstacle to be managed. They think I'm just the young widow who'll be grateful for whatever scraps they throw me. Inside the house, Madison immediately took charge. "Elena, we know this is difficult, but there are practical matters that need to be addressed immediately." Dad's companies. Blackwood Technologies employs over 3,000 people. They need stable leadership during this transition. Carter nodded. "We've already spoken with the board. They're prepared to install interim management until the inheritance is settled." Until the inheritance is settled. Like my husband's death was just a paperwork problem. That's very thoughtful, I said. But James left detailed succession plans. I'll be taking over as CEO. The look that passed between them was pure poison. Elena, Madison said carefully, running a tech company requires experience, expertise. Dad may have included you in some business discussions, but I co-designed the last 3 product launches. I hold patents on 7 of our core algorithms. I've been James's business partner for 2 years. And I know more about your theft than you realize. Be that as it may, Carter said, the board has concerns about continuity, about maintaining investor confidence during this difficult time. Translation: they're worried a 28-year-old widow can't command respect in Silicon Valley boardrooms. I understand their concerns, but I'm sure the board will feel more confident once they review my qualifications and James's explicit wishes regarding succession. Another look between them, this one worried. Elena, Madison said, perhaps we should discuss the will privately before the formal reading. Why? Because Dad's will contain some unconventional elements. We want to make sure you understand the full implications before making any public statements about your role in the company. Unconventional elements. My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression neutral. What kind of elements? Carter pulled out a manila folder. Dad left specific instructions about how his estate should be handled, instructions that affect all of us. I'd like to see them. We think it would be better if you heard them from us first, as family. As family. These 2 people who'd barely acknowledged my existence for 3 years were suddenly concerned about family communication. Go ahead. Madison opened the folder and pulled out what looked like a copy of James's will. Dad established a challenge for his inheritance, a competition, essentially. Competition? What kind of competition? The 3 of us have to work together to run his companies for 1 year. At the end of that year, whoever has contributed most to their success inherits everything. I stared at them. He's making us compete for his money? Not just his money, Carter said. His entire empire, Blackwood Technologies, plus some other assets we didn't know about. What other assets? A bourbon distillery in Kentucky, worth about $300 million. Kentucky. James had never mentioned Kentucky, had never mentioned bourbon beyond his appreciation for good whiskey. The total estate is valued at approximately $800 million, Madison continued. But here's the thing, Elena. The will requires unanimous decision-making. If any of us tries to sabotage the others, or if we can't work together, everything goes to charity. Everything goes to charity, which meant they needed me to play along, at least initially. And you're telling me this because... Because we want to be fair, Carter said. We know Dad cared about you. We want to honor that. Bullshit, but I nodded like I believed them. So what are you proposing? Partnership, Madison said. Real partnership. We work together, build the companies, and at the end of the year, we split everything 3 ways regardless of what the will says. Split everything 3 ways, which was generous, considering they could have just waited for me to fail and taken everything themselves. That's very kind of you, I said, but why would you give up the chance to inherit everything yourselves? Because we're family, Carter said, and family takes care of each other. Family takes care of each other, from the people who'd barely spoken to me at Christmas dinner. That's when I realized they were lying. Not just about the partnership, but about something fundamental. Something that made their sudden generosity make sense. They need me alive for something. I'd like to read the will myself, I said. Of course, after the formal reading tomorrow. Now, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Elena, Madison said carefully, the will is quite complex. Technical language, legal terminology. It would be better if... I have a master's degree from Stanford, and I've been reading legal documents for 3 years. I think I can handle it. Carter's jaw tightened. The lawyer has the original. This is just a summary. Then I'll wait for the formal reading. Elena, Madison's voice carried a note of warning now. We're trying to help you here, to make this process easier for everyone. Right? I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the rose garden James had planted for me when we got married. Everything looked normal, peaceful, like a widow's house should look. But I was thinking about Carter being at the office during a board meeting James hadn't mentioned, about Madison's sudden interest in family solidarity, about the bitter almond smell on James's skin, and about the fact that they were both here, ready with explanations and proposals less than 6 hours after their father died. "There's something else," Carter said behind me. "Yes? The Kentucky property, the bourbon distillery. Dad never mentioned it to any of us. We think there might be complications with that part of the inheritance." "What kind of complications?" "Legal issues, ownership disputes. It might be better if we sold it immediately and split the proceeds." Sold it immediately, before anyone could investigate too closely. "Actually," I said, "I think I'd like to visit Kentucky, see this distillery for myself." The look that passed between them was panic, quickly masked. "That's not necessary," Madison said quickly. "We can handle the Kentucky situation remotely." "I'm sure you can, but James left me this property, and I want to understand what he thought was important enough to hide from his own children." Hide from his own children. Because that's what it was, wasn't it? A secret so big that James had never mentioned it, even to me. "Elena," Carter said, standing, "I think you should know that we've already contacted the authorities in Kentucky. There are some irregularities with the property records." "What kind of irregularities?" "The kind that might attract unwanted attention from law enforcement." My blood went cold. "Are you saying James was involved in something illegal?" "We're saying the Kentucky property has a complicated history. It might be better for everyone if we distance ourselves from it." Distance ourselves or cover it up? "I think," I said carefully, "that I need to understand exactly what my husband left me before I make any decisions about distancing myself from it." "Elena, I'm going to Kentucky tomorrow, after the will reading. If there are legal issues, I want to understand them. If there are family secrets, I want to know them." "That's not a good idea," Madison said flatly. "Why?" "Because some secrets are buried for good reasons." Interesting choice of words. "Well then," I said, walking toward the door, "I guess we'll find out what those reasons are." As they left, I caught Carter murmuring something to Madison about damage control and contingency plans. But I was already thinking about other things. About the bitter almond smell on James's skin. About the fact that both his children had been suspiciously prepared for his death. About the Kentucky property they were desperate to keep me away from. And about the fact that I was supposed to be dead too. Because if they'd killed James for his money, they would have had to kill me as well to inherit cleanly. The fact that I was still alive meant either they were planning to kill me later, or they needed me alive for something specific. Something to do with Kentucky. As I locked the door behind them, as I stood alone in the house where James and I had been happy for 3 years, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to be the grieving widow who quietly accepted whatever they told me. I was going to find out the truth about my husband's death, about his children, about the Kentucky property they were so afraid of. And if they'd killed him, I was going to make them pay. But first I had a funeral to plan, and a will reading to attend, and a very interesting conversation with Mrs. Chen about family secrets. Because something told me that James's death was just the beginning. The law office of Whitmore and Associates occupied the top floor of a financial district high-rise, all polished mahogany and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking San Francisco Bay. I sat in the leather chair across from Mr. Whitmore's massive desk, flanked by Carter and Madison, trying to look like a woman processing grief instead of a woman processing murder. 24 hours since James died, 18 hours since I realized his children killed him. "Before we begin," Mr. Whitmore said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses, "I want to express my personal condolences. James was not just a client, but a friend. His death is a tremendous loss." "Thank you," I said quietly. "It's been difficult. Difficult to sit next to his murderers and pretend I don't know what they did." Carter reached over and squeezed my hand. We're all grieving, Elena, but we'll get through this together. Together, like we were actually family. Now then, Whitmore continued, opening a thick manila folder, James's will is, as I mentioned yesterday, quite unconventional. He spent considerable time crafting these provisions, and he was very specific about his intentions. Madison leaned forward. We've explained the basic structure to Elena, the competition, the unanimous decision requirement, the charity clause. My blood went cold. In general terms, yes. James implemented several such mechanisms in his will, safeguards designed to activate if certain conditions were met. What kind of conditions? Carter asked, and I heard nervousness in his voice. If any beneficiary dies or disappears during the challenge year, if there's evidence of foul play regarding James's death, or if certain sealed records are accessed without proper authorization. If there's evidence of foul play, James had suspected his children might kill him. What happens if these safeguards activate? I asked. Everything changes. The inheritance structure, the company ownership, even the distribution of assets. James was very thorough in protecting against various contingencies. Whitmore looked directly at me. Elena, James left specific instructions that if anything happened to him under suspicious circumstances, you were to be given access to a private safe deposit box, one that neither Carter nor Madison knew about. The silence in the room was deafening. What's in the box? Madison asked, her voice tight. I don't know. James sealed it himself and gave me specific instructions about when it should be opened. And when is that? I thought, but before I could ask, Whitmore was continuing. However, there's something else you all need to know about the Kentucky property. He pulled out a deed that looked much older than James's other documents. The Blackwood bourbon distillery wasn't something James purchased. It was inherited from his father, Patrick Blackwood, who died in 1991. That's impossible, Carter said immediately. Dad grew up in Oakland. He never mentioned Kentucky or bourbon or any family distillery. According to these records, James legally inherited the property when he turned 21, but he never took possession. The distillery has been managed by a trust for over 30 years. Managed by a trust? Who's been running it? A gentleman named Henry McCullough, who's been the master distiller since 1955. But Elena, there's something unusual about the trust documents. Whitmore handed me a folder. The trust has a very specific termination clause. It ends only when all 3 inheritors of Patrick Blackwood's bloodline take joint possession of the property. All 3? I don't understand, Madison said. There are only 2 of us, Carter and me. Actually, Whitmore said carefully, according to these documents, there were originally 3 Blackwood children. James had a twin brother named Marcus. The room went silent except for the sound of my own heartbeat. He died as a child, but legally his heirs would still have claim to the property. His heirs, did Marcus have children? Not that we know of, but Whitmore hesitated. There's a provision in the trust documents that suggests Patrick Blackwood had other family members, adopted children, stepchildren, even illegitimate offspring who might have legal claims. Carter was looking increasingly agitated. So you're saying there could be other people with rights to Dad's inheritance? I'm saying the Kentucky property is legally complicated in ways that James apparently chose not to address during his lifetime. Chose not to address, or was prevented from addressing. Mr. Whitmore, I said, I'd like to visit the Kentucky property as soon as possible, to understand what James left me. Elena, Madison said quickly, that might not be wise. If there are legal complications, then I need to understand them. This distillery was important enough for James to include in his will. Important enough for him to hide from you both. I want to know why. We could handle the Kentucky situation for you, Carter offered. You don't need to travel while you're grieving. While I'm grieving, like grief would make me incapable of making decisions. That's very thoughtful, but I think James would want me to see it for myself. I stood to leave, but Whitmore held up a hand. There's one more thing. Elena, James left a sealed letter to be given to you after the will reading. He was very specific that you should read it alone. He handed me an envelope with my name written in James's familiar handwriting. The paper was heavy, expensive, and there was something bulky inside. What is it? I don't know, but he said it would help you understand his true intentions regarding the inheritance. His true intentions. I tucked the envelope into my purse, very aware of Carter and Madison watching my every move. I'll read it tonight. Elena, Carter said as we prepared to leave, before you make any major decisions, would you consider having dinner with us tomorrow night? Just family, talking through everything. That sounds lovely. But as we rode the elevator down to the parking garage, as I said goodbye and watched them drive away in their matching BMWs, I was thinking about the envelope in my purse. About the safe deposit box I was supposed to access if anything suspicious happened to James. About the Kentucky distillery that 3 inheritors were supposed to claim together. And about the fact that Carter and Madison had been awfully quick to suggest I shouldn't visit Kentucky alone. In my car, I locked the doors and opened James's letter with shaking hands. My darling Elena, if you're reading this, then I'm dead, and you're wondering if my death was natural. The answer is probably not. Carter and Madison have been stealing from the company for 3 years. They think I don't know, but I've been documenting everything. The evidence is in safe deposit box 1247 at Wells Fargo downtown. The key is taped under our bedroom dresser. But the theft is just the surface. There are things about my family, about the Kentucky property, about why I really married you, that I should have told you years ago. I didn't marry you just because I fell in love with you, Elena. I married you because you're the only person I've ever met who's strong enough to survive what my family really is. Go to Kentucky. Find Henry McCullough. Ask him about my brother Marcus. Ask him about my father Patrick. Ask him about the children. And Elena, trust no one completely, not even me, especially not me. The man you married is not the man you think he was. I'm sorry for everything, but you're stronger than they are. You always have been. P.S. Your vitamins have been tampered with. Stop taking them immediately. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the letter. The vitamins. I'd been taking vitamins every morning for months, part of my health routine. James had bought them for me, said he wanted to make sure I was getting proper nutrition. But if Carter and Madison were putting ricin in my vitamins, I raced home, my mind spinning with implications. If they were poisoning me slowly, if James had discovered their plan, if he'd tried to warn me. Then his heart attack wasn't natural. They killed him to stop him from exposing them. I hit play with trembling fingers. James's voice filled the room. Elena, if you're hearing this, then they did it. Carter and Madison killed me rather than face prosecution for embezzlement. But that's not the worst of it. Pause the sound of papers rustling. The Kentucky distillery isn't just a bourbon business. It's the hub of something much larger. Something my father built before he died. Something I've been trying to stop for years. Another pause. James's voice was strained. My father didn't die in 1991. He faked his death and built a criminal empire. Human trafficking, money laundering, worse things. The distillery is just the front. My vision blurred. Carter and Madison aren't just thieves, Elena. They're part of it. They've been using Blackwood technologies to support the trafficking network. And when I threatened to expose them, the recording cut off? I sat on our bed, surrounded by the remnants of the life I'd thought I understood, and tried to process what James had told me. My husband's children weren't just greedy, they were criminals, part of a trafficking network run by their supposedly dead grandfather. And they'd killed James to protect their operation. But why keep me alive? Why the elaborate charade with the will and the challenge? I pulled out my phone and called the one person I trusted completely. "Mrs. Chen, it's Elena. I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." "Of course, dear. What's wrong?" "James's children. Have they been coming to the house when I wasn't here?" "Why do you ask?" "Because I think they've been tampering with my medication, and I think they killed James." "Elena, you need to come home right now. Pack a bag and get out of that house." "Get out of the house. Why?" "Because they're coming for dinner tonight, and I don't think you're supposed to survive it." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, at the empty house around me, at the vitamins sitting on my nightstand that had apparently been slowly poisoning me for months. "They're coming for dinner tonight, and I don't think you're supposed to survive it." But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated the woman their father married. Because Elena Morrison might have been a naive widow, but Amanda Sullivan, the girl I'd been before I met James, knew how to survive. And now it was time to remind Carter and Madison Blackwood what happens when you underestimate your prey. I had 6 hours before Carter and Madison arrived for dinner, 6 hours to turn from victim to predator. First, I drove to Wells Fargo and accessed James's safe deposit box. Inside, I found exactly what he'd promised: 3 years' worth of documentation proving his children had embezzled over $40 million from Blackwood Technologies. Bank transfers, shell company records, forged invoices, everything needed to send them to prison for decades. But I also found something else, a folder marked Elena Morrison Background Investigation. With shaking hands, I opened it. The first page was a private investigator's report commissioned 3 months before James and I met. It contained my entire life history, my real name, my childhood in foster care, my college records, even psychological profiles based on interviews with my former teachers. James had investigated me before we ever met. The second page made my blood run cold. It was a memo from the same private investigator. Subject exhibits all desired characteristics: high intelligence, childhood trauma leading to adaptive resilience, no strong family connections, exceptional ability to reinvent identity when necessary. Recommend proceeding with contact scenario. Our meeting hadn't been accidental. James had known exactly who I was, exactly what I'd survived, exactly how I'd react to his particular brand of wounded charm. He'd hunted me like prey, but the final page in the folder made everything click into place. It was a birth certificate I'd never seen before. Elena Catherine Blackwood, born March 15, 1996. Father, Patrick Michael Blackwood. Mother, Catherine Ann Sullivan. I was James's half-sister. Patrick Blackwood, James's supposedly dead father, was my biological father, too, which meant I wasn't just James's widow. I was a Blackwood, with legal claim to everything Patrick had built, everything James had inherited, everything Carter and Madison thought they were stealing. No wonder they needed me dead. I sat in my car outside the bank, staring at a birth certificate that rewrote my entire identity, and laughed. Actually laughed, because the irony was perfect. Carter and Madison had killed their father to steal his fortune, not realizing they'd just murdered the one person who could have protected them from their biggest threat. Me, the girl they thought was a gold-digging stepmother, was actually their half-sister. The woman they were planning to poison at dinner was actually the rightful heir to their grandfather's criminal empire. And they had no idea. I drove home and began preparing for war. First, I called Henry McCullough at the Kentucky distillery. The conversation was brief but illuminating. "Ms. Elena, I've been expecting your call for 30 years. 30 years? Ever since your daddy Patrick told me you'd be coming home someday to claim what's yours." "Your daddy Patrick. Mr. McCullough, I need you to tell me about the children." A long pause. "Which children, darling?" "The ones James mentioned in his letter. The ones connected to the distillery. Those children are safe now, most of them. Your brother Marcus made sure of that before." "Before what?" "Before Patrick decided Marcus was too dangerous to live. James's twin brother hadn't died as a child. He'd been murdered by their father." "Mr. McCullough, is Patrick really dead?" Another pause. Dead men don't send Christmas cards, child. Christmas cards? He's been in contact with you? Patrick Blackwood has been pulling strings from the shadows for 30 years. Your husband's death, your children's betrayal, even your marriage, all part of Patrick's grand design. My marriage was part of Patrick's plan. Why? What does he want? He wants his empire back, and he needs a Blackwood to claim it. But James tried to destroy what Patrick built, tried to save the children, shut down the network, so Patrick arranged for James to die. Carter and Madison work for him? Carter and Madison are tools. Useful idiots who think they're stealing their father's fortune when they're actually doing their grandfather's bidding. Everything clicked into place. Carter and Madison hadn't killed James for money. They'd killed him because Patrick had ordered them to. And tonight, they'd complete the job by killing me. Unless I killed them first. I spent the next 3 hours preparing my trap. I switched the ricin-laced vitamins with identical capsules filled with harmless powder. I prepared 2 identical bottles of Pappy Van Winkle bourbon, one clean, one laced with enough ricin to kill a horse. I set up hidden cameras in the dining room, the living room, and the kitchen. Most importantly, I called Dr. Sarah Chen. Dr. Chen, this is Elena Blackwood. You performed reconstruction surgery on me 15 years ago. Elena, my God, I never expected to hear from you. How are you holding up after James's death? She knows about James. How do you know about my husband? Because James hired me to perform your surgeries. He's been funding your medical care since you were 13. Dr. Chen, I need you to do something for me tonight. What? I need you to document 2 murders. A pause. Elena, what are you planning? I'm planning to give Carter and Madison Blackwood exactly what they gave their father. Elena, listen to me carefully. You don't want to become a killer. Trust me on this. Why should I trust you? Everyone I've ever trusted has been lying to me. Because I'm the only person in this whole mess who's been trying to protect you. Protect me? Dr. Chen, who do you work for? I work for someone who's been watching the Blackwood family for a very long time, someone who wants to see Patrick's empire destroyed and the children saved. Who? Someone who should have died 30 years ago but survived long enough to get revenge. Your Uncle Marcus. James's twin brother, who'd supposedly died as a child. Marcus is alive? Marcus has been planning this for 3 decades, the investigation into Carter and Madison, the evidence James collected, even your marriage. It's all part of Marcus's plan to bring down Patrick and save the trafficking victims. My head was spinning, so James didn't really love me. James loved you more than life itself, but he also knew you were the key to destroying his father's empire. You're Patrick's daughter, Elena. You have legal claim to everything he built. Everything he built. Dr. Chen, if I take over Patrick's network, if I use it to save the children, will that make me as bad as he is? That depends. Are you planning to become Patrick Blackwood, or are you planning to destroy everything he created? Destroy everything he created? I'm planning to burn it all down. Then you're going to need help, more help than just Marcus and me. What kind of help? The kind that comes with badges and federal authority. Elena, the FBI has been building a case against the Blackwood trafficking network for 5 years. They're ready to move, but they need someone on the inside. They want me to be a spy. As the sun set over Palo Alto as I prepared for Carter and Madison's arrival, I made my choice. I wouldn't just kill James's murderers. I'd use their deaths to activate the dead man's switches James had built into his will. I'd claim my inheritance as Patrick's daughter. I'd take control of the trafficking network. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock. Through the peephole, I could see Carter and Madison on my front porch, both carrying expensive wine and wearing expressions of fake concern. Time for the final act. I opened the door and smiled. You're right on time. I've been looking forward to this all day. Because I had been. For 3 years, I'd played the role of the grateful young wife, the appreciative stepmother, the naive widow. Tonight, they'd meet the real Elena Blackwood, and she was going to destroy them. "Come in," I said warmly. "Dinner's almost ready." "You look beautiful," Madison said, kissing my cheek. "How are you holding up?" "Better than expected. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday about working together as a family." "And?" Carter asked, hopeful. "And I think you're absolutely right. Families should take care of each other. Especially when family members are murderers who need to be stopped." In the dining room, I'd set the table with James's best china and crystal. Candles flickered softly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Everything looked perfect for an intimate family gathering. "This is lovely," Madison said, settling into her chair, "just like the dinners Dad used to plan." The dinners Dad used to plan, like the one he'd been preparing the night they killed him. I wanted tonight to be special, a celebration of our new partnership. I poured the clean bourbon into my glass, the poisoned bourbon into theirs. "To James," Carter said, raising his glass, "and to the family business." To the family business. If only he knew which family business we were really toasting. We drank. The Pappy Van Winkle burned going down, smooth and expensive and perfect for the occasion. "Elena," Madison said as I served the main course, "we've been thinking about the Kentucky situation." "Oh?" "We think it might be better if we handled it remotely. Legal complications can be messy." "Messy? Like murdering your father is messy." "Actually, I've decided to visit Kentucky tomorrow. I spoke with Henry McCullough this afternoon." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You spoke with who?" Carter's voice was sharp. "The master distiller. He's been running the property since your grandfather died. Lovely man. He told me such interesting stories about the family." Madison and Carter exchanged glances. The first hint of panic. "What kind of stories?" Madison asked carefully. "Stories about children, about a network your grandfather built, about what really happened to your Uncle Marcus." "Now they know I know." Carter's hand moved toward his jacket, but I was faster. The Glock I'd taken from James's gun safe was in my hand before he could blink. "I wouldn't," I said pleasantly. "The ricin's already in your system. You've got maybe 10 minutes before respiratory failure." The look of shock on their faces was perfect. "Ricin," Madison whispered. "The same ricin you've been putting in my vitamins for 3 months. Poetic justice, don't you think?" "Elena, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about murder, Madison, your father's murder specifically." Carter tried to stand, but his legs were already betraying him. The ricin was fast-acting when concentrated. "James knew about the embezzlement. He knew about the trafficking network. He knew you were slowly poisoning me, so you killed him." That's insane," Madison gasped, but she was swaying in her chair now. "Is it? Then explain why your fingerprints are on his heart medication. Explain why you were both at the office the day he died. Explain why you're so desperate to keep me away from Kentucky." "Because Kentucky is where Patrick's empire is headquartered. You see, I know about Grandfather Patrick. I know he's not really dead. I know he's been running a human trafficking network for 30 years. Carter's eyes were wide with terror now, not just from the poison but from the realization of what I knew. "I also know I'm Patrick's daughter, which makes me your half-sister, which means I have legal claim to everything he built." "Everything he built. But here's the beautiful part," I continued, walking to the window. "I don't want his empire. I want to destroy it." Madison tried to speak, but only managed a choking sound. The ricin was shutting down her nervous system. "Every child he trafficked, every family he destroyed, every life he stole, I'm going to get justice for all of them." Carter collapsed from his chair, blood trickling from his nose. "Starting with justice for your father." As I watched James's children die from the same poison they'd used to kill him, as I prepared to activate the dead man's switches that would transfer their father's fortune to me, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Well done, granddaughter. Now the real work begins. Welcome to the family business." But I wasn't afraid anymore, because I understood now what James had been trying to tell me in his letter. I was stronger than they were. I always had been. And now I had $800 million, a global criminal network, and 30 years of rage to fuel my revenge. Patrick Blackwood thought he was recruiting me. But he'd actually just armed his greatest enemy, the last child he'd ever destroy. 3 hours later, the police bought my story completely. Mrs. Blackwood, I'm so sorry for your loss. Losing your husband and his children in the same week, I can't imagine. Detective Sarah Martinez was professional, sympathetic, and entirely convinced that Carter and Madison had killed each other in a fight over their father's inheritance. The evidence I'd planted in their rooms, financial records showing their embezzlement, communications about eliminating me, even samples of the ricin they'd been using, painted a perfect picture of sibling rivalry turned deadly. It appears they poisoned each other, Detective Martinez explained as the coroner's team removed the bodies. We found identical ricin preparations in both their personal effects, classic murder-suicide scenario. Murder-suicide, if only she knew how right she was. I still can't believe they would do something like this, I said, dabbing my eyes with tissues. James loved them so much. Money makes people do terrible things, Mrs. Blackwood, especially when there's this much at stake. $800 million. Enough to make anyone commit murder. The good news is that with both other heirs deceased and clear evidence they were planning to harm you, the inheritance transfers to you immediately. No challenge period, no legal complications. No legal complications. Patrick had planned this beautifully. After the police left, after the coroner's van disappeared into the Palo Alto night, I sat in my kitchen and opened my laptop. Time to access the real Blackwood Technologies systems, the ones James's children had been using to support human trafficking. The password was exactly what I'd expected, Marcus 1975. What I found in the company's hidden directories made me physically sick. Shipping manifests for specialty cargo, financial transfers to shell companies in 12 countries, facial recognition software designed to identify and track missing children. Carter and Madison had turned their father's tech company into the backbone of a global trafficking network. But I also found something else, a directory labeled Contingency Phoenix. Inside were detailed plans for shutting down the entire operation, network vulnerabilities, FBI contact information, safe house locations for rescued victims, financial accounts that could be liquidated to fund victim services. James had been planning to bring down the network from the inside. And now I could finish what he started. I was still reading through the Phoenix files when my phone rang. The caller ID showed H. McCullough, Kentucky. Henry? Elena, darling, I just heard about Carter and Madison. Are you all right? I'm fine. They're dead. Good. 2 less monsters in the world. 2 less monsters. I liked Henry's perspective. Elena, we need to talk. About Patrick, about the network, about what happens next. What do you mean? I mean, Patrick's been planning this for 30 years. Your husband's death, his children's betrayal, even your inheritance. It's all part of a larger game. A larger game? What kind of game? The kind where you're not the hunter, darling. You're the bait. My blood went cold. Patrick doesn't want you to destroy his network. He wants you to take it over, to become the new head of the trafficking operation. Why would I do that? Because he's got something you'll trade anything to save. What? 3,000 children, Elena, in facilities across 6 countries. All of them rigged with explosives that will detonate if the network detects any attempt to shut it down. 3,000 children. He's using them as human shields? He's using them as motivation. Take over the network and keep it running and the children live. Try to destroy it and they all die. I felt like I was drowning. There has to be another way. There is, but it requires you to become something you're not going to like. What? It requires you to become Patrick Blackwood. Become Patrick Blackwood, the man who destroyed so many lives, who'd built an empire on human suffering. Henry, I can't. Elena, listen to me carefully. I've been watching this family for 60 years. I've seen what Patrick's capable of, the only way to save those children is to beat him at his own game. How? By being smarter, more ruthless, and more willing to sacrifice than he is. More willing to sacrifice? What are you asking me to do? I'm asking you to take over the trafficking network, to run it like Patrick would run it, to make the hard choices that will keep you alive long enough to figure out how to save the children. The hard choices. And if I can't figure it out, then at least the children live long enough for someone else to try. I thought about the 3,000 kids Henry had mentioned, about Lisa, the 10-year-old I'd seen in the shipping container, about my own childhood, about all the foster homes and late-night terrors and adults who'd failed to protect me. Could I become a monster to save them? Henry, if I do this, if I take over Patrick's network, what happens to people like you, to the good people who've been trying to stop him? We become your allies, your inside team, the people who help you find a way to destroy the network without killing the children. Destroy the network without killing the children. Patrick's expecting you in Kentucky tomorrow morning. If you don't show up, if you don't accept the inheritance, the contingency protocols activate. The children die. And if I do show up, then you get a chance to save them. But Elena? Yes, once you take over the network, once you become the head of Patrick's empire, there's no going back. You'll have to make choices that will haunt you for the rest of your life. Choices that will haunt me. I thought about Carter and Madison dying on my dining room floor, about James murdered by his own children, about Patrick pulling strings from the shadows while children suffered in shipping containers. I'd already made choices that would haunt me. Henry, there's something you should know about me. What's that, darling? I've been haunted my entire life. What's a little more? Elena, I'll see you tomorrow morning. I hung up and sat in the silence of my empty house, surrounded by the remnants of my old life. In 12 hours, I'd be in Kentucky, taking control of a human trafficking network, becoming the thing I'd spent my adult life fighting against. But I'd be doing it to save 3,000 children. And to get my revenge on Patrick Blackwood. Because I had one advantage Patrick didn't know about, one secret weapon he couldn't plan for. I wasn't just Elena Morrison, the naive widow he'd manipulated. I wasn't just Elena Blackwood, the daughter he'd abandoned. I was Amanda Sullivan, the foster kid who'd learned to survive by becoming whoever I needed to be. And Patrick Blackwood was about to discover that his greatest creation was also his greatest threat. My phone buzzed with one final text before I packed for Kentucky. Safe travels, granddaughter. Your real education begins tomorrow. My real education. But Patrick had taught me something valuable tonight, something he didn't even realize. He'd taught me that family wasn't about blood or loyalty or love. Family was about power. And I was about to become the most powerful Blackwood of all. To be continued? The story continues as Elena travels to Kentucky, where she'll discover the true scope of Patrick's trafficking empire, meet the mysterious Marcus who's been planning revenge for 30 years, and face the impossible choice between saving herself and saving 3,000 children. But the real shock comes when she realizes that everyone, James, Marcus, even Dr. Chen, has been lying to her about who she really is and why she's the key to either saving or destroying everything Patrick built. Because Elena's true identity isn't just Patrick's daughter or James's widow. She's something much more dangerous. And Patrick's about to find out what happens when you underestimate the one person who knows all your secrets.